Hello and welcome back to SPARCS 18. Thank you so much for hanging with us through some technical difficulties. Our team here did a fantastic job to resolve the issue as quickly as we could, and we appreciate your patience. And also all the photos that you sent us of why you were waiting for us to come back online through Twitter, particularly the dogs with the pizza. Now, Claire, thank you for another fantastic presentation. One of the things I really want to ask you about, I guess, is particularly looking at rescues and working dogs coming into rescues. We had someone asking particularly about border collies and the fact that people will often label perhaps higher energy dogs as being working and performance types dogs and saying that lower energy dogs get labelled as being pet or companion animals. I guess they wanted to know whether there's evidence of heritability of these kind of activity levels versus a product of life experience and environment. So there's that aspect of the question. And then I'd really like to talk about this labelling of dogs and the mixes of the dogs as well, I guess, not just purebreds, but the mixes, and particularly with animals coming through shelters, how that is useful or not useful.
Well, I think the only information I have relating to heritability is from the Kelpie part of the project, where we did actually show some moderate heritabilities, although with high standard errors. So I'll put the writer on that and say they had high standard errors on those, which means a high standard error means that you can't completely rely on the statistic that we found. So I'd say that they are very certainly in the retrieving dogs, I would say strongly heritable, because the dogs of that type typically beget dogs of that type. So I would say that it is an intrinsic part of the dog's makeup, genetic makeup, rather than being a trained thing. Although that there are training exercises that can be undertaken to achieve better control of those dogs. So, for example, one of the exercises that we use in retrieving is called a rev up, rev down drill, where you encourage the dog you get the dog excited and play with it, and then you get it to go into a calm activity like a sit or a lie down and reward that activity, and it teaches your dog to have an off button, which is a useful thing. And in retrieving, like, you can see that even those really, really high energy dogs have to be extremely obedient when they approach the firing point. They have to walk at heel with the owner, they have to sit quietly while the bird is launched, and they don't go until they're sent. And so that all has to, that's a train, so even though you have that genetic makeup of being really, really high energy, the training on top of that brings that back into a manageable.
Moderate it.
Yeah, but I do think that those kind of dogs, they need to be in a home with a person that has the ability to manage that. I don't think you want to put them in a novice dog owner home or in a home that doesn't have access to abilities for those dogs to exercise. They don't necessarily need to work, but they need to be someone who appreciates what they need in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, and then I guess just touching on this labels or assumptions that perhaps we think may relate to purebred working dogs. Things like saying, that working dog's not suitable to live in a city environment, and just whether that can apply to mixed breeds. Or I guess to me it seems fair to consider that once a dog's removed from a very specific gene pool or category or context, that we do better by the dog to assess it on its own individual merits and the behaviours that it's showing us, rather than relying on labels or assumptions about the type.
Absolutely. I mean, you see even within the Labradors, within the breed, there's considerable variation between the high energy elite retrieving dogs and the low energy lie by the fire Labrador. I mean, that's one breed, presumably they're managed as one breed. So if you can't even do it within a breed, you can't expect to label animals of different breeds that way. I mean, it's certainly, yes, there might be border collies that are high energy, but there also might be border collies that are low energy. You do have to look at the individual dog in question.
Yeah, and particularly for animals coming through shelters, I guess, where rehoming is, one thing you ask people coming in to adopt an animal is, what sort of energy level do you want to live with? Do you want a dog that you need to go out and run with twice a day, or do you want something that is a lower energy? So I guess the benefit of assessing the individual animal and its own merits and its own needs means that in that rehoming environment you can more likely to make a correct match and have happy dog and home.
Even within a litter there's variation. So for example, in the litter that I have right now, I have 3 dogs that are relatively high energy. I have 1 dog that's just like chill out in the corner. So there are different, even within a breed and within a particular, you get this variation. Yeah, there's variation in these traits. Are not simple Mendelian Ps. These are traits that are controlled by many, many, many different genes. And so while I've highlighted a few genes in my talk. It's really, those are just like the low-hanging fruit. That's not saying that they're responsible for everything we see. By no means is that what I'm trying to say. These are just major effect. These are genes that are having major impact in those populations that are easily identifiable. It's not by any means saying that that's all there is in the story.
Yeah, it's not cookie cutters.
No, absolutely not. Every dog is different.
Yeah.
So to that point, somebody from Twitter threw out a fun word, pleiotropy, essentially where a gene influences two or more seemingly unrelated, for everybody out here and for what I just double checked. So the question was, do you believe that there are pleiotropic effects between noise sensitivity and overall environmental stability?
Oh, that's a question that's beyond my pay grade. Well, my skill set, I should say. I'm a geneticist, not a mythologist, sorry.
So it's something we can bring to the panel as well.
I think I'd ask for an ethology expert to answer that one.
Excellent.
Now, another question that came in from Dale was asking, is noise sensitivity genetic or is it related to early exposure and training?
So as with most complex traits, I believe it's a mixture of both of those things. However, having been an owner of both retrievers and a border collie, I can tell you that there's definitely, you do get some Labradors that are more noise sensitive than others. So for example, my Labrador Theo doesn't like thunderstorms very much, but my border collie, I believe the border collies have actually been selected to be more noise sensitive because they need to be attentive to the person who was handling them in a trial situation. The retrievers, on the other hand, have been selected to be less noise sensitive because they need to have a gun fired over their head. And so I do, I definitely believe it's genetic, but I also do believe that like a sensitive exposure to the noise at an early age is a very important thing, even in dogs that have that genetic potential to be less noise sensitive. We still want to introduce them carefully to the gunshot. You don't want to just take them up and fire a shotgun over their head. You want to maybe be dropping pans around the puppy pen and maybe taking them to a trial and parking a few kilometres away to start with and then moving them closer. So people don't usually throw them in headlong into this situation that's frightening. Although sometimes with a thunderstorm you can't really control that, right? So, you know, I guess socialisation is really important for so many things, and you want to get that early exposure in during that critical period before 12 weeks. So.
Yes, very important what you just said. This also relates to what we were talking about yesterday with the idea that people think domestication brought us the dog, and in some ways it did, but this socialization period will really bring us the individual and have that relationship develop and help them be okay with a gunshot right by their head.
I mean, as Chris was saying yesterday, the genes are just the blueprint, and then what the builder does with that is a different story. So, you know, you've got the plans there, but then, you know, so many things can get in the way of things going well, as we saw today with our technical issues. And so,
that was all genetic.
It was not genetic, but you know, we had the blueprint there of how everything should work, and then some environmental thing happened that did something, and it's the same with noise sensitivity or other things that we're interested in. So.
Good comparison. Very good.
And I guess just maybe as one final question, I'm curious, I guess, amongst all the projects you've got going on now, where do you, or what are you finding the most exciting for the future? Which area are you most interested to kind of uncover the next thing?
I have to tell you that I've got probably at least 25 projects at the moment.
Let's hear them.
Pick a favourite.
Yeah. Top 5.
And the one that most excites me, at the moment I'm most excited by the seasonality project, because that is one that just was, what it's yielding has been very surprising and very exciting to me, and I'm excited to see where that can lead, because I actually think that's a really big story that really isn't, you know, it's hard to get other people to appreciate it right now, but I think it really is a big biological change in dogs that has impacted many different areas of their physiology. But that said, you know, I have ongoing projects in Dalmatian deafness, in the farm dog work. I've got a project for funding review at the moment based on canine longevity. So I'm interested in, but the theme of my lab, I would like to say, I'm interested in within breed variation. I use the breeds because they're a way of corralling some of the genetic background. But I'm interested in what makes, how does behavior arise from genes? Like, how does that happen? That just fascinates me. And so with the things like the reproduction work, you begin to see, oh, that makes that chemical change, and you can see that it pushes it from there. Oh, that thing makes that go from that to that, and it changes complete pathway, the complete track that chemical takes. It's just amazing, I think. And so there's a lot of, many things fascinate me. I'm just a curious person.
It's an exciting time to be working in the field.
Yeah. I think it's always like limited by availability of samples and access to resources and funding and so forth. But most of us who work in canine genetics are a little bit creative about how we fund our work. And luckily, being in a university, I'm lucky enough that my department gives me like a small stipend each year that helps, and we can gather money from bequests, and they've set up a little a donation account for me now, which I've not actually put out there yet, but so we can gather bequest type support for our work, but it's much harder to achieve public funding for our work.
Well, something we'll also bring into the panel today as well. All right, we thank you so much for your talk and joining us for these Q&As. We are going to take a lunch break, and we will be returning at 1:30 Eastern Daylight Time. So that's 1:30 Eastern Daylight Time, and we look forward to seeing you all back. And please send in pictures of your dogs if they're eating or sleeping or doing any of those things. We'd love to see you all. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into my presentation this morning. I've really enjoyed having you.
Thank you.